Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a video covering the major rework that has occurred to ATGMs in Cold War. Now if you do like the video, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe down below, as it really does help out the channel. And yes, the ATGMs, they have gone through a major rework as of the update of 23rd of July 2024. They now have a minimum arming distance and they accelerate to their max speed far quicker than they did before. So what does that mean? Well, that means in general, ATGM's time to target will be a hell of a lot quicker than it used to be, which means firing ATGMs at range is way easier now than it used to be, because the ATGMs fly very quickly and they will hit the targets at range probably twice the speed that they did before. I'm going to show you gameplay in a bit and clips of that in general, what it was like for some of the tanks pre-rework and post-rework, and you'll get to see that for yourselves. But they also now have a minimum arming distance, which is now actually a balancing factor in the ATGM's mechanic, right? I myself think this is a good change for Cold War because it actually gives them a balancing factor. It also means that you can counter it, especially if you are in a tank that's lightly armoured. You can get up close to a tank that has a minimum arming distance ATGM, and they will not do as much damage to you as before. It limits the amount of times people will be able to shotgun you, because that was a frustration with ATGMs before, especially if you're in a lightly armoured tank like a Leopard, for example. A ATGM tank like a BagelPanzer would come sprinting in, less than 20 meters, ATGM you, and then clip you out. Now, they won't be able to do that, because when they actually fire the ATGM from point blank, they'll have a big X on their screen, and they will do 25% of their damage of that ATGM. So let's read the article, and I'll be able to go through this little article explaining it all for you, and then I will show you the examples of the ATGMs in action. So the ATGM minimum arming distance and acceleration improvements. ATGMs are being updated in two ways: minimum arming distance and improved acceleration values. Minimum arming distance is the distance the ATGM needs to travel until it is armed and can do its full damage and penetration. With a minimum arming distance, when you are too close to your target, the HUD will have an X over your reticle with a note that you are too close. You can still fire the ATGM, but as the missile is not armed, its damage potential is reduced to only 25% of its base damage, and its penetration is only 75% of its base value. So basically, if you have 1,000 penetration on your ATGMs, which some things like the Weasel do have, it'll only have 750 pen, and naturally with 25% of its base damage, you tend to do with the Weasel, I think it was about 300 odd damage in that range. Orange is still a factor in that regard. But yeah, it was about 300 damage if you were to actually pen those ATGMs. And when it's talking about a big X on your screen, they have a handy little picture here, look, that says too close. This is what it's like when you are within the minimum arming distance range. And the big X on your screen, if you fire at this point, when that is on there, you will basically do no damage, and there's quite a likelihood, depending on the tank you're firing ATGMs from, that it might not even pen as well. But yeah, ATGMs will be set to one of two values, based on the vehicle's 65 meters or 100 meters. So short range is 65 meters, long range is 100 meters. The minimum arming distance and the percentage of damage and penetration when not armed can be viewed on the tank's detailed stats page. As you can see here, if it's got a minimum arming distance of 65 meters, and then it'll tell you it's 25% of its base damage if you go below that 65 meters, and 75% minimum arming penetration multiplier. So again, 75% of its base pen. And this is all in the detailed statistics page in the garage. If you go look at your tank and go look at the stats, that tells you where, you know, your rate of fire and all that sort of stuff is. It is on the right-hand side in the bottom corner, and this is how it displays it. New HUD elements will communicate when you are too close. If you are farther than the minimum arming distance, the HUD will appear normal. So, as you can see, when the tank is 64 meters, so it's below the 65 meter arming distance, you now have that big X on the screen that says too close, and you will basically not do your damage. This is a good handy indicator to see how far away from the target you are, and this will be a handy thing to keep looking at when you are in your ATGM vehicle. It's something you've always got to keep your eye on. You also hear new doink impacts when hitting a tank with an ATGM that did not arm. You'll probably hear that in one of the clips that I have. Acceleration, in addition to the encouraging a farther engagement distance with the minimum arming distance, well, that felt weird. Yeah, basically, instead of encouraging you to fire the ATGMs from point blank and shotgun like it used to be, now they're encouraging you to fire from a further distance with that minimum arming distance. But to help with that, the ATGMs felt too slow before, so the slow speed is a likely contributing factor for the players using a tactic more like shotgunning with these weapon types. So yeah, that's why you used to have people just running in shotgunning, because they were quite difficult to use at range. So if you're firing at 500, 600, 700 meters, it would take a long time for the ATGM to get to its target, and you would have to give a lot of lead, and half the time you'd probably still miss. Now they fly very, very quickly. To address this, the acceleration values for ATGMs has been increased so that they'll quickly reach their max speed. The new acceleration will greatly decrease the time it takes to hit a target, giving them better usability at range, which is true, and it's a lot nicer to use ATGMs at range now than it was previously. It's actually a little bit harder to use them at close range now because they do speed to target so fast. The acceleration rate for impacted ATGMs is currently 20 to 40 meters per second and is increasing to 80 to 145 meters per second depending on the ATGM. So they do travel a hell of a lot quicker, and with the new ATGM rework, you cannot just shotgun people from less than 65 meters depending on the tank and, well, get away with it pretty much. So what tanks have what arming distances? Well, as you can see here, the tanks that fall into the short range of 65 meters is the Alvis Stormer, the BagelPanzer, the Desert Warrior, the Jaguar 1, the M3A1 Bradley, the M3A2 Bradley, the Weasel 1A1 TOW, the BMP2, the Object 934, the Magak 7C, the Macarver Mark 1, the Macarver Mark 2B, and the Macarver Mark 3. So all of those tanks are in the 65 meter short range minimum arming distance. So all of those tanks can fire their ATGMs and pen them for their full pen once they get beyond the 65 meters. Then the tanks that fall into the long range, so the ones that have to fire from beyond 100 meters to be able to get their full damage, is the G.I. Joe STRV S1 Wolverine, the Marder 1A1, the Marder 1A3, the Cobra Arctic Hiss, the BMP3, the T62M1, the T72AV, the T72B, the T72B OBR 1989, the T72BU, the Ignis Purgatio, the Strickthorden 904056, the AMX-13 SS11 TCA, the M551 Sheridan, the M60A2, the MBT-70, the Rickety Panzer, the Raketen Jagdpanzer II, the BMP-1, and the WZ-122. Now, it's a bit funny to me that the Rickety Panzer is at 100 meters when the Jaguar 1, which is basically the same tank but in Era 3, is actually at 65 meters. That's a little bit odd, but it's one of those things with these arming distances that I actually do feel, for me, that the MBTs, so the actual MBTs, should have been in the 65 meter range, and the tanks that are ATGMs, well, the ATGM onlys might have been able to fit into the 65, but the more light tanks and stuff like that should have been at 100, because the light tanks have the mobility to get at good distances and be able to fire the ATGMs from further distances, whereas the MBTs will be always close range, and it means that the ATGMs will become not pointless, but fairly ineffective on a lot of the MBTs because they will have to be at 100 meters. Like the T-72's ATGMs aren't that good in general, and with this change, you're probably not even going to use them, if we're honest, because you are going to be less than 100 meters away firing at enemy tanks, and then when you switch to that ATGM, if you do that, you're not going to be able to use it. So for me, the philosophy behind it should have been that the light tanks were at the 100 meters and the MBTs were possibly at the 65 meters, but that's just my personal opinion. Everyone's going to have different opinions on this generally, and yeah, that's the way I would have done it, but they are the tanks, and that is the ranges that they currently occupy. So that is all the information that you'll need to say, oh, what's my favourite tank? Oh, my favourite tank is the WZ-122. Well, that is in the long range of 100 meters. You cannot use the ATGMs less than 100 meters. Otherwise, you'll have that penalty for your minimum arming distance and your damage and stuff like that. So what do the ATGM rework changes actually look like So this is pre-rework for the WZ-122, 360 meters. You saw just how long that ATGM took to hit the target. This is post-rework, and you can see with the WZ-122 just how much quicker this ATGM hits. That was 620 meters. That hit faster than the pre-rework WZ-122 at 300 meters. That is the BagelPanzer firing at an Object 120 pre-rework. This is post-rework BagelPanzer. See how quick that hit that guy? This is the same distance as the Object 120. Once again, in the blink of an eye, the shell hits the target. The ATGM flies so much quicker now than it did before, making it so much easier to be able to use the ATGMs at distance. This is an Ignis play for an assassination that would be very typical for me in the Ignis. We got within 50 meters of the target, fired an ATGM, and we messed it up. But it didn't, you know, we could have done it. This is Ignis post-rework, and that is what it's like shooting at a target from point blank now with the ATGM rework. We had a big X on our screen, it said too close, and we did like 186 damage, because our base damage is only about 700 and something in the Ignis. This is the that was the STRV ATGM speed pre-rework. This is not about the gameplay so much as to just show you what it's like now to play a tank like the STRF, where we have a 100 meter minimum arming distance, and we are going to play this tank and run around and try and use it in the new time. Now, it's still very useful, the STRF, for example, but you've just got to play more smart. You've got to play smarter, be more careful with where you are firing. So you see, we fire at a Stormer 30 there. We did no damage with our ATGM, because it hit, because we fired in the less than 100 meter range that the STRF actually has for its minimum arming distance, which meant that we couldn't actually do the damage. We're getting out of dodge because it's a little bit awkward. We're fighting in a very close quarter situation here, trying to get some sort of distance to be able to use the ATGM. So I decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to poke up here and see if I can find anyone to shoot at. Oh no, that's a BMP. So we're going to use the main cannon because we are too close. We cannot fire at this BMP with an ATGM. He fires his ATGM at point blank and only does 250 damage. I'm again trying to get some distance. You can see the X is popping up on the screen. It says too close. We were 85 meters away from the BMP. We could not use that ATGM. So now you're going to have to remember what that STRF long-range ATGM shell velocity felt like with the pre-rework, because this is what it's like now post-rework. We are at 400 meters. And this ATGM is going to fly very, very quickly and hit with it just in the blink of an eye. 1300 damage, just like that. The ATGM flies so much quicker. And it will encourage the ATGM users and the tanks that use them to fire at longer range, which is the way that they should have always been, realistically. They should never have been this run-in shotgun get out kind of mechanic. They should always have had some sort of skill behind them like this, which is knowing your distance, knowing where you got to place yourself to use them at the distance that you need to, and then be able to smash out the rounds with the ATGMs, because it actually adds in a balancing factor for them, because that's the thing that I think the ATGMs lacked before, is a balancing factor. They never had that. So if you were a lightly armoured target and something like this Marder 1A3 charged in at you and just ATGM'd you and then machine gunned you, there was nothing you could do. Now, if you see a tank that's an ATGM tank, you can get in close and they won't be able to do too much to you in that way. You just try, that's just a way of negating it by yourself. They will be a hell of a lot easier to use at range now, and you will see it a lot more where you get the ATGM snipers now, because that time to target is so much shorter. I mean, you've seen it with the STRF, how much of a difference it's made. And you'll find that they won't be coming in quite as close, which is good, because a lot of the gameplay in sort of Era 2 with the faster tanks that were ATGM lovers, or a lot of Era 3 as well, Era 3 was ruined by it quite badly, is that people that would just run in, shotgun, and run away. And if you're an MBT, there was not much you could do about it. Now, like I say, if they muck up and get too close, their ATGMs, like you saw with the Marder 1A3 trying to shoot the AFK tank, won't do anything. And it's just a way that you can try and manipulate it to negate their advantage of their high alpha tanks. But it also adds a balancing mechanic to ATGMs that they just lacked previously. For me personally, I do think this is a good change. Like I say, I would have had a slightly different philosophy, but I went over that earlier. But yeah, I think personally this is pretty good. I don't know what you guys think. It's probably best to leave it on this video. Wargaming will be paying attention to what people say about this, because this is a major change for Cold War, and leave your feedback, essentially, on this video. So as always, everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got all the information you need about the new rework, how it works. You saw the stuff like with the Ignis, with the short range, how it now acts if you do fire short range, or too short a range, I should say. And you'll be able to make the most of your new ATGMs. If you've been playing the new ATGMs and you hadn't realised there was a rework, I hope this video has cleared it up for you, and you'll be able to go have fun with your new ATGM rework that is in the game. So as always, everybody, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
A great success!